everyone, my name is Karishma Mehta, the first human at Humans of Bombay. Welcome to our first talk show, How the Hell Did I Do It? On this show, we speak with the dreamers, the pioneers, the go-getters, and the never-say-noers from all walks of life. We discuss their journeys, the highs, the lows, and even the blows. And through our conversation, we get pretty close to figuring out how the hell did they do it. When God was distributing fear, you probably never made it to the line. That's something our next guest, Miss Mahua Moitra, repeatedly got to hear. From leaving a lucrative job in the States to joining politics, Mahua Moitra is a dynamic, self-made woman who vehemently refuses to take no for an answer. And she's just so candid. She opened up about the qualities she admires in the opposition party and in a heartwarming confession told us about her celebrity crush. We assure you, there's no way you would have guessed this one. The unfiltered demeanor she's known for carrying to Lok Sabha accompanied her here to our interview. And so over an honest conversation, I managed to ask Ms. Mahua Moitra, how the hell did you do it? Thank you so much for doing this with us, Mahua, at a very short notice. But I have to start this interview by telling you a very interesting anecdote that happened. So Netra, who works at Humans Bombay, was in a cab and she was telling her family members that, we're going for this interview, and she was talking about you. And she hung up and the taxi driver asked her, कि आप उन्हीं की बात कर रहे हो जो भाषण देती है पार्लियामेंट में. So she said, yeah, he's like, बहुत अच्छा भाषण देती है. And that's when we realized that it's like far spread, and I had to start the interview telling you.
That's quite wonderful that I'm now known as the Bhashan Wali. Yeah. That's absolutely brilliant.
And I think that's the most opportune moment for me to, kind of say that you're so eloquent and your speeches are so well traveled, and you speak so vehemently about things that you obviously feel passionately about. And all of that began with a very unique kind of schooling, right? Like you were homeschooled. And now it's a trend and now people are all for homeschool. But back during that time, I'm sure it was a novelty. So what was that like?
I sometimes, like nowadays, people take conscious decisions for homeschooling and decide. For us, I think my parents belong to a generation, they're a lot older, and they frankly belong to a generation where children were, they were there, and your life didn't revolve around your children. And certainly for us, our life, my parents' life certainly didn't revolve around us. And we lived in a tea garden, and my sister went to boarding school. And, I was born a second child. There was quite a big gap between my sister and I. And my sister wasn't doing too well at boarding school. She was getting sick and blah, blah. So they didn't want to send me there. There was no boarding school like Assam Valley or something, which there is now in those days. So it was actually a matter of, fine, there's no school, so what's the answer? So today people would be like, let's move. Yes. To my parents, it would never occur that they would turn their lives upside down for their children. So it was, my mother was, I'll teach her. So she would go to Calcutta and she'd buy the books. Wow. She'd buy books for the year and she'd come back. And it was very freewheeling. We'd read we'd study what was part of what kids my age should have been studying. Yeah. But apart from that, we just read a lot and do a lot of math and, basically keep our eyes and ears open. So I think it wasn't part of a very conscious decision to homeschool as it is now. It was basically like, it is what it is and we deal with it.
Yeah.
So I think that typifies my attitude to life also, because a lot of people ask me today, oh, what do you think of this? Why do you think of that? I said, I don't think very much about it. You just kind of get on with it.
Get on with it.
Yeah. Right. So I think that attitude was exemplified by my parents, and I thank them for it.
Yeah. And if you ever had to write, an autobiography on your life, what do you think the very many chapters would be, right? Because we know the chapter on politics. Can you tell us a little bit about the chapter on family, on friends? Draw us a picture about that.
Yeah, it would be, I think families, you realize the importance of family as you get older. Yeah. You take it for granted when you're younger. So growing up, my sister and I had a fairly large age difference, and she was in boarding school. So growing up, I wasn't very close to her. And we only overlapped for a few years at home. And she was the type who'd be like, oh, my friends are coming home, can you get out of the room? Because we shared a room and she never wanted me around, obviously. And, from that to today, where I think she's the only person who really, when you in a nuclear family such as ours, a sibling, I realize the importance of a sibling now. Because sometimes I feel there is nobody in the world who understands me or my dynamics as much as her. Because there's so many things that are I don't need to explain. Like our relationship with our parents, like, you know, my mother or my father or their dynamic or the dynamics between X and Y. There is so much that is so easy because she just gets it all.
And she's there.
And she's there. And I think that that is a very strong support system.
And you know, you've extensively spoken about this, that, you know, you came from this, you know, family, a middle class family where, you know, your parents used to, it was, your father used to work in at a tea plantation, mother was a teacher.
Mother wasn't a teacher.
She wasn't, but she just taught you.
Sorry,
she
was my teacher, but
she was
your
teacher. Yeah, so teacher in a specific sense. And then you kind of went on to have this very, you know, different life when you started your professional career. So was it something that, you know, that was fostered within you that, you know, I want to live this well, or I want to have a life of luxury, for example?
No, it's not that. You see, growing up in a tea plantations, it was a very privileged childhood and a very privileged life. By no means was it a non-privileged life. It was a very privileged life. We grew up on a very large estate with lots of help and a good life. My parents did not let luxuries get to us, but that didn't mean that, you know, it was not a luxurious life. So I actually grew up in a bubble, in a bit of a privileged life. And I think then when we moved to Calcutta, and when I finally went to school, and you were in a competitive environment, and I think Bengalis value education. So growing up in Calcutta in the early 90s, late 80s, early 90s, you weren't around with children where, you know, what it was, okay, so what are you going to do? Everybody was applying to the US. Everybody was applying to the UK. It was pretty obvious that that was the thing to do. And most of my friends or whoever I hung out with certainly came from pretty much more or less the same backgrounds. So like I said, we didn't grow up in penury, but we also didn't come from families which could pay $100,000 a year for their kids' education. So it was understood that you were smart and you were competitive and that you would win a scholarship.
And I know you've spoken about, you know, this is obviously a very childhood kind of memory where, you know, an astrologer predicted that you would be like Indira Gandhi.
My mother had one of those.
But I also saw your recent interview with Dr. Tharoor where you said that, you know, you grew up in an India where you could take freedom for granted or your independence for granted. So at that point in time, were there any, you know, was there an interest for you, you know, to understand the political climate at all during, say, your teens or your early 20s on what the state of affair was? Because, as you've pointed out, it's very different now.
Yeah. Well, you know, I grew up in Assam. Obviously, post-emergency and post all of that. So we lived it was in a bubble, and the Assam agitation was starting at that point. So that was when people were getting kidnapped, and it was violent agitation. And they had this Bengali Khadao, which Bengalis leave Assam, and they asked the All Assam Students Union, and you had Prafulla Mahanta who came in as chief minister. So I remember vague memories of upheaval in Assam, and something was changing. And then you came to Calcutta, and Calcutta at that time obviously was communist rule. And we took it for, but the fact that it was communist rule didn't really affect our childhood. It was, you know, Jyoti Basu was chief minister. And if you asked a child, like in a Hindi book, the dog was called Moti. In our heads, the chief minister was called Jyoti Basu because there was no question of having known another chief minister or having, or where does another chief minister come? So all through my life in Calcutta, certainly, it was the left winning every election and Jyoti Basu, and the left dispensation was very much part and parcel of the landscape. So yes, that was it. I wasn't very political. I left in my late teens to go to the US. I wasn't political in college in the sense I wasn't part of the college Democrats or the college Republicans. So I wasn't part of the US political setup. It didn't really interest me very much in those days. But I then developed a great interest for what was happening in India. And kept up with that. And I remember Rajiv Gandhi's assassination and my mother coming in, waking us up in bed. And she's saying, wake up, you know, Rajiv Gandhi's been killed, so I remember that. And because he was shot late at night, if you remember. And he was not shot, sorry, the bomb blast happened quite late at night. And I remember waking up to that. So these things in our head, I remember when Mrs. Gandhi was assassinated and we were all sent back and there was all this, my sister was sent back from school. And so all these memories stand out, these really seminal moments. But apart from that, we didn't grow up in a very political atmosphere, no.
No, not at all, No. Do you remember any particular moment. I know that there was one with your reunion that, where you felt like, I've done this, I've lived the life, I'm earning well, I'm living well. And you were at your 10-year reunion when you felt like, if not now, then I don't want to come back 10 years later and still be doing the same thing.
Right.
But was there a particular incident that piqued your that moment within you that, okay, I'm going to go back to India?
No, there wasn't an incident. I found a set of aerograms at my parents' house, which I had written when I was a freshman at college. Okay. Obviously, when I just gone to the US, and in those days, there was no email. And, we'd call once a week for 99 cents a minute. Sounds ridiculous, but there you go. And we would write these blue aerograms to our parents. And every week, I would write a couple of them. And I found one which I had written to my mother and my father. And it said that I would want to work in the US. I would want to work for a few years here, but then I don't want to go back to India, and I want to enter politics. Yeah. And I, obviously at 17 or 18, I'd already written that down on a piece of paper to my mother, living in the US. I don't even remember writing that letter. So it was a bit funny when I found it and I was reading it. But so there was obviously something in me from a long time. There wasn't a single aha moment. It was something that was growing. It was, that was in there. I knew I would come back, but it was a question of when. There was no single catalyst which propelled me. Right. It's something that I was, going to reunion and thinking that 10-year reunion, the clock's ticking. So that was probably it, but there wasn't one moment which kind of pushed me over the edge. It was something that I knew I was going to do. Yeah.
So now I have to ask this question because I feel like I've been through this, and there are certain industries that women or girls are advised not to get into. I know for me that was acting. I'm a theatre student. It was my biggest passion to be in Broadway and things like that, and it was a strict no because not film industry. Politics is up there when it comes to women, especially the youth, right? Like, don't get into something that's typically quoted dirty. What was the reaction of your parents when you're leaving this very lucrative, luxurious life that you built for yourself on your merit, on your hard work, and you have decided to come to the grassroots and get into a field that's not very, and I'm sure back in the day even more so, not very, okay, yes, please, my daughter should go into politics?
Yeah, in that way, Bengalis and certainly my parents are exceedingly gender neutral. Okay. Like, I don't even think my parents look at us like daughters or sons. They're completely gender neutral. So the fact they were upset that a child of theirs was living a life of security and entering a life of insecurity. But it wasn't necessarily that there was this daughter who had to be extra protected and there was this extra dirty world. I don't think that occurred to them.
It was not gender-based.
It was not gender-based. They were worried that, you have, like you said, built up a life on your own merit and you're successful and we can see the path ahead and it's a good one. And especially when you have no guarantees in this world. You don't have a father who's in politics. You don't have like this big legacy of a political family. You don't have, you've got some savings, but you don't have a ton of money backing you. So obviously these were obvious questions. And certainly friends and family, there were a few outliers, but most of them obviously told my parents. Like everybody would go around in the golf club telling my father, you're talking about my father saying Dulal's daughter's gone nuts. Or have you heard about Dulal's daughter? And obviously this couldn't have helped. Doesn't help, I think. But so I think they were upset as a child, living a life of security for insecurity because your parents obviously want security for you. And that was that. But aside from that, I don't think my being a woman, I certainly didn't think of it like that, and I don't know. My gender wasn't a part of it. Yeah,
it was more be protective about your child.
Yeah, about your child, and I think also, we had grown up with the image of Mrs. Gandhi.
Absolutely,
we'd grown up with the image of this tough Prime Minister. Yeah. I mean, she was very large. We were a Congress voting family through and through. Yeah. So that was obviously there. So the question of a woman in leadership or a woman in charge, like my mother was a very strong woman. Yes. My grandmother was a very strong woman. So we'd always seen women who wore the pants, so to speak, using a sort of non-gender neutral term. But so it didn't bother us like that. Right. And also again, to come back to the same thing, I think today I realize, when I was growing up, I didn't realize, today I realize how much Bengal and the Bengali culture has actually attributed to who I am, because even without knowing it, we have imbibed it. Absolutely. And, this gender specific roles are not, Bengalis don't do that very well. Yeah. They're pretty much, girls can do pretty much the same thing that boys can. So I think that that helped.
Yeah. So you know, when you took this decision and moved back, this is a question that comes up often, and I thought that you're the perfect person to answer. I've decided as a youth or as, you know, somebody who's a working professional to give up my career. I feel passionately about politics. What's that next step? What do? You come back to India, or you leave your job, and then what do you do?
I once did an interview which for a friend, which actually it was quite popular and it's still available on YouTube. And there are three things, and it is myth, and there's method, and there's magic. So I think for politics, you need all of that. There are three M's, and it's not money and it's not muscle. And the three things that matter. There's actually a very interesting story, and I'll digress a little bit since this is about storytelling. So when I was wanting to come back to India, I was talking to everybody who knew somebody in politics, so I could speak to, and I didn't know anyone there. And this was obviously UPA 1, when all the Baba log were in power. And I was talking to my good friend Abida, who's one of my best friends from college. And I said, Abida, do you know anyone in politics? And she said, oh, I know Jitin well. And she was obviously talking of Jitin Prasad, who was then a minister in the UPA government. And she said, I'll talk to Jitin and you can have a chat with him as to what it's like in this world. And I said, okay. And I think she told him. And he called me, which was very kind. He called me. I was in the UK. I was still working. I hadn't quit my job. He called me and we had this chat. And he said, so what are you thinking? So I said, you know, thank you for calling. And I'm thinking of going back and starting. And he said, and to me, obviously politics was the Congress. There was nothing else in those days. So I said, I'm going to join the Congress. And he turned around and he said, but why would the Congress want you? Do you have money? Do you have muscle? Why would they want you? So I turned around and said, but you were a banker as well. And, you know, you were in the Congress. And he said, yeah, but I had a father who was in politics. I had a huge legacy. You have none of that. And I remember thinking, like, this can't be right. This just can't be right. And anyway, I came back to India, long story short, and I'm sitting in Delhi in a YI, Young Indians, CII had this thing called YI, in a YI gathering, and CK Prahlad, who was his management guru, was giving a talk. And I'm sitting here in Delhi in this hotel, a lot of young people around, and the guy next to me turns around, he's talking to me, and he says, oh, you've got your job and come back and you're trying to join politics. Wow, you know, I wanted to do that also. But then I met one of the very successful young ministers, and he told me, you don't have money, you don't have muscle. Why would you join? So I looked at him and I said, was it Jitin Prasad? And he says, yes. Why? How do you know? I said, because he told me exactly the same thing. And a part of me actually felt like, you know, why are you going around spreading this negativity around where you're telling people? So I remember part of me getting quite angry and saying that I'm sure you can make it in politics without money and muscle. And I'm living proof that you can. And I think the three M's that you need, and I've made it a point after that, whenever young people come and ask me, what do you need in politics? I always tell them money and muscle don't play a part in it. What you need is myth, method, and magic. So when you want to enter, you got to first create the myth, you know, of who you are and what you are, and then you come in, and then you have to have a method of how you go around it. And then finally, when you hit the ground and you meet people, when you start meeting the actual people, it's about a magic, it's about a connection. So politics is a mix of this myth of who you are, this kind of method of how you do things, and this magic that you weave when you meet people.
So do you remember that moment of magic for you when you, for the first time, went on ground, I'm assuming as part of the Congress, because that's how you started out, and felt that connection with somebody?
Yes, I do remember. I do remember my first set of meetings. I remember there was the Youth Congress president of Bengal was somebody called Mamata Banerjee, who we would affectionately call Kaltuda, and he kind of took me under his wing. And Pranab Mukherjee was then PCC president, who was also very kind to me. And I really owe my start in Bengal politics to the two of these. And I remember going to my first meetings and, you know, letting me speak. And I had not obviously spoken in Bengali. I mean, I spoke in Bengali, but I had not lived here for a long time. And the kind of Bengali that you need to speak in, you know, in the villages and in public life, it is not necessarily the kind of Bengali that we grew up speaking at home.
Right.
And we'd always been an English-speaking family. So Pradeep Bhattacharya, who was the president of the Congress, who was working president of the Congress, sat with me and he would write all these sentences out. And I would go and learn them. And for years, I would go back to those notes, I remember, because you would pick up certain words. So when I went in and actually did the connection, I remember there was those first days, and there was that heady feeling. And Amitabh Chakraborty coming back and he's telling me in Bengali, he says, this ei neshata bujli eta mod cigarette theke beshi. He says, do you see this intoxication of a crowd? You don't need cigarettes, you don't need alcohol. This is the intoxication of a crowd. And I remember him telling me, he says, this is why people in public life don't retire. And there's something to that. There is something to that, you know. You realize that a politician never retires because it's very, very difficult to move away from that magic.
Yeah. That feeling,
that euphoria, that connection, that, you know.
And you know, as you've started this journey on ground, what were some of the reactions of your friends back in banking or you know, in the in the world of finance?
They were quite worried about me, to be fair. They all said, I mean, they know I was a tough cookie, so everyone said if anyone can do it, Mahua can do it. And I also went to Mount Holyoke, which was a very close-knit all-women's college. And Mary Lyon, our founder, said something. It says, you know, that go where no one else will go and do what no one else will do. So I think that all of us imbibe in our lives. So I think they were all confident that I'd make it, but they were also worried at the personal cost I was paying, the professional cost I was paying. And I went for a long time before I got elected, you have to remember, right? And those years were tough. And they saw me struggling through those years. So they were all worried. They didn't doubt that I would make it. But they were just worried and they were like, "No, we hope you're okay." And they kept asking, "We hope you're enjoying this." And we hope, because we know it might take a few years, but you'll do it. But we just hope that you stick it out. Yeah. You stick it out and that, you know, you're okay. So I think that was good. So by and large, my extended community of friends was fairly supportive.
Yeah. And you know, once you kind of made this switch, I think that you began the process of thriving after, you know, the years passed. Do you have any particular incident or memory that you still remember that kind of makes you feel that magic again, right? The magic that you spoke about.
I get those moments every day, actually. Yeah. I get those moments every day, and that's one of the reasons that I live in my I used to be an MLA from a place called Karimpur, which is on the Bangladesh border. And I got elected from Krishnanagar, but this MLA constituency doesn't fall inside Krishnanagar. It's just on the border. So a few panchayats are common. And I still choose to live in a place which is literally a village. It's not even a town. It's a village 6 hours from Calcutta. And the reason I do that is I think every day it just keeps it real, because you know who you're working for, you know what matters. I think it is very difficult it will be very difficult for a person like me representing a constituency that I do, living in Delhi or living in Bombay or living, I mean, I'm pretty good at moving between lives, but I think as far as my daily life is concerned, and every moment I have this magic, because when you can see things for yourself. You're going on a road, you will know that this road something is wrong. Yeah. You can be stopping somewhere completely random for a cup of tea and somebody will come and tell you, oh, do you know what's happening there? Yeah. So you are your own eyes and ears. You're not depending on anybody. And you learn the stuff. Like I think when I finally got the ticket to run for MLA, I was so ready because I had done 2 panchayat elections. I had done countless MLA elections. Yeah. You know, I didn't need anyone to run my election. By the time I got a parliament ticket, I didn't need anyone to run my election. I knew exactly what it took to run an election. So I think that confidence or that ability to know what it takes can only come from time spent and from experience. And I'm very glad in a way that I didn't run for office in 2009. I was gutted, I remember, when the Trinamool and the Congress came together and I was going to run on a Congress ticket and I didn't end up getting it. Didn't end up because the seat went to the Trinamool. But today I look back and I said I would have been the biggest idiot had I run in 2009. Yeah. I would have been probably half the parliamentarian I am now. Had I won. Because I think being an MLA, doing all those years of groundwork, and today I know that nobody can take me for a ride.
Speaking of which, you know, obviously one of the key pointers when your name comes up is that you're an amazing orator. I've seen all your speeches as well. Is that something that you actively, consciously worked on, or has it always been the case? Have you always orated well?
You know, I love talking. I've always seen myself as a neta, as my mother said. I've, you know, always been little Miss Bossy and spoken, but you have never done debating. I love poetry and elocution and reading and all of that. And, you know, but I've never actively done debating or anything of that. But I think I'm expressive, and when I feel something in my heart, I don't, I've never tried to modulate myself, which is a good thing and a bad thing. Because a lot of people say, Mahua, why don't you slow down? Why don't you appear less angry? Why don't you appear? And I try and take some of these suggestions on board. But at the end of it, I think you have to be true to what you feel.
Right.
And I don't think there is a single speech that I have given that I have not felt from my heart. And it would never come out that way. When people say, do you write, do you do your own research? Or do you? Yes, I do. Because you need to feel it.
Yeah.
You know, you need to feel it.
Of course.
And so all those little bits and pieces. And it's important. And I was shocked. I would be very, pleasantly surprised and a bit shocked at the reaction my first speech got in Parliament.
That was the iconic
one. Yeah. But even in the Legislative Assembly, when I was MLA, my first speech went viral, I remember, in Bengal. But because the Assembly's proceedings in Bengal are not televised live, it was only what the media wrote about that people got to see. They never got to watch my speech because it wasn't televised. But even in Bengal Assembly, to be fair, they'd given me lots of chances and they always let me speak, and sort of my confidence as a speaker developed there.
Right.
As you know, I'd got a long innings before I came into Parliament. So now when I came into Parliament, it didn't faze me in the least. I was just like, I do this for a living. Right? I mean, I'm in crowds all the time. The Assembly is pretty much like the thing. So that didn't. And also, I operate very well under pressure. Some people don't. I thrive under pressure. So when the Treasury benches started heckling me, something inside me was just like, you're not getting away with that. And I think that in some way brought out this Ma Kali Roop, as my friends like to call it, which people seem to lap up.
Yeah.
And that's when I realized that what is so wrong in our country, because nothing I said was rocket science. Nothing I said was, you know, something that people don't know. But then I realized that there's so few people saying it.
Right.
I mean, why would somebody who's driving a taxi in Bombay have heard a speech of mine in English? Please understand, I don't even speak in Hindi. And identified with it. There's obviously something, some emotion, some rage that I'm being able to tap into without even realizing it. And I think that is the connect.
Yeah.
So, and I'm happy that that's happened, because I'm not making an effort to do it, and I couldn't have made an effort to do it. So, you know, as long as that happens, and as long as I can bring up things that are important to me and hopefully important to lots of people in this country, then...
So you brought out an interesting point, right? Like your speech delivery predominantly happens in English.
Right.
And you're speaking about concepts and kind of subtler nuances that are very, very important for people to understand. Like your first speech was about fascism and the science. A common Indian man, to understand a complex topic like that in English is difficult. So do you think that there is that language barrier for you in terms of what you're trying to communicate? Because yes, the educated people will appreciate it and say, yes, she's absolutely making sense. But what you're trying to convey may not reach the people you're actually trying to reach.
No, I am trying to... That's you know, you can't... It's like if you're doing... It's like this designer friend of mine once told me, and he doesn't do Pret. So he's only doing couture. And I said, why don't you do Pret? He said, if I did Pret, I would need to worry about what's selling. I would have to put my creativity on the side. I'd be making lehengas and blouses for the marriage season, because that's what sells.
Yeah.
So I think if I worried about who my audience is, like everyone says, oh, you are not thinking about your Gangetic belt audience, you need to speak in Hindi, you'll reach a large... Hindi is not my language. If I speak in Hindi, then everyone in the South will not understand me. Everyone in the Northeast will not understand me. So, you know, I don't think I need to tailor myself to an audience. I am what I am. And when you're saying something, it is the emotion that comes across. Right. So, if speeches are translated in every language, there are enough local channels and local media that are translating the main things of the speech. And everything I'm talking about, fascism as a concept might be a very nuanced concept, but as a reality of how it's affecting their lives, every Indian gets it. You get what I'm saying? So, you might think it's an elitist concept. It's not really. The average Indian on the road knows that ये तो बहुत पैसा खर्च हो रहा है इस election में. ये तो सिर्फ विपक्ष को दिखाई नहीं रहे हैं. They know all this. So, when you can put it in the frame of fascism, but the average Indian working class, you know, laborer actually knows 5 out of the 7 things you're talking about.
Just not in those terms.
Just not in those terms. But as long as it's translated and he gets that you're talking about it, that's fine.
Yeah, yeah. I think that makes a lot of sense when you put it like that. Yeah, absolutely. And you know, when we go further into, you know, kind of penetrating a message, I think a section of Indian society that obviously cannot be factored out is the youth. And I believe that oration is a great way to get across to the youth. So, you know, when the time comes for the youth to enter politics, is there any particular message or is there any particular kind of advice that you would like to give at this point?
You know, I'm probably going to get into a lot of trouble for saying this, but I frankly think this whole youth is a bit overrated. It's not your age which does anything. It is what your discipline, and you need discipline and you need good intent.
Yeah.
So just being between the age of 19 and 30 doesn't do anything. Right. Just because a person is young doesn't mean I have all this great energy that I can tap into to make into a better India.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, there are most people, the youth are among the most selfish. When I was young, I was quite selfish. I didn't think about what the rest of the world does and what the rest of the world needed. I remember that. As a child, I was selfish. As a young person, I was selfish. So it is not just enough to be young. When people say you need the youth, yes, you need the youth, but you need disciplined youth who care about people other than themselves. Yeah. So that's important. That's what we need to tap into. Just tapping into young people doesn't do anything. You need to tap into the right type of young people.
It's targeted. And, you know, as we were talking about, like, you said that, you know, I may get into trouble. I know that, you know, fairly often you've said things because you are a passionate speaker that have been misconstrued or not been well received. The recent, the comment that you made on Ma Kali, for example. Can you tell me how is it like to be that unfiltered, right? Because a politician is usually, or if I had to put it in cliche terms, considered to be diplomatic. Like you know what you're saying, you're very careful of the PR narrative, the PR machinery. How you are very brazen. You actually do wear a lot of your heart on the sleeve when you feel about something, and not just limited to comments and oration, but you take things that really matter to the Supreme Court, to the highest court of the country. Can you walk us through, you know, what's that like?
You know, I think I've made a very conscious effort to keep my life very real.
Yeah.
I don't have a PR machinery. I don't even have an assistant. I've never, I mean, I don't have an agent. I do nothing of this. So I don't try and modulate myself. I think the reason I am elected today is because I am who I am. And because people see in me and identify in me something that they identify with.
Right.
Okay? So I don't want to change that. And frankly, at the end of the day, I think if I'm a good person and I have good intent and I do good, then the odd time where somebody is hurt, and I think we've turned getting offended into a national pastime. Everybody seems to be offended. I don't really care. There's lots of stuff that people do that, and I strictly believe in that. In that, you know, there's a poster, and you can find it on the internet, and it says, you know, you don't like the movie, don't watch it. Don't like the book, don't read it. Yeah. Don't believe in premarital sex, don't do it. Right? I mean, so I really believe in those liberties. And I think spending a large part of my life in the West, I really believe in these lines of liberty and keeping it as it is. So this kind of national pastime with getting offended, I mean, everybody's going to get offended. Yeah. So I don't pay a lot of attention to it as long as you're true and good and you do what you need to do. And what's important? Yeah. It's not, all this is not important. What is important is what I do every day and what a difference if I'm making to people's lives. And that's what's important. And so I don't really care about all this. And frankly, if I look within myself and I feel like I've done something wrong, I'll apologize. I'm the first person. Yeah. So I have a hot temper, and when it comes down, I'll be like, you know, I'm really sorry. I shouldn't have said that. And I would say it immediately. Yeah. But if it's something I feel strongly about and I feel like I haven't done anything, I'm not letting anyone bully me into sort of saying sorry. I mean, forget it. You've got the wrong person. Yeah. You can put all the pressure on me. You can try and bully me. You can put me in a room and lock the door and throw away the key, and I will not relent. Yeah. Sorry, it's not happening. Yeah. And over the years, I've realized if you stick to your ground and you stay strong, everybody moves away.
Like after the Kali comment blew up, you did tweet saying that I'm not going to, you know, kind of backtrack.
I'm a Kali worshipper. I worship Kali the way I do. Yeah. And that's it. Yeah. I was, you know, I don't want to go back into it. I think I've said whatever I had to in that. But that was one of the classic cases of this above all to be, you know, to thine own self be true. I was true to myself.
As opposed to, just the opposition feeling offended. I know that even your own party kind of retracted and said that, it's her personal view, which it absolutely is.
There you go.
So how do you kind of, do you feel that, that kind of, because it's a dichotomy, right? It's your own party and it's a comment. Do you?
I don't feel anything. I don't feel anything. I feel what I've said is the truth is the truth.
And it doesn't matter who it is.
It really doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. Yeah. And especially in a topic like this, it's not, I'm not going out and speak. This is not a topic of, say, I'm not speaking on the country's foreign policy, or I'm not speaking on economic policy, or I'm not speaking on policy decisions of the party, where I can totally understand that you have a script that you stick to. This wasn't something like that. This was really in the realm of, I would say, a very socio-cultural personal space. So I completely, it doesn't faze me in the least.
It's a personal form of worship.
It doesn't faze me in the least.
Right, absolutely. And when you've gone that one step beyond, when things have bothered you, right? Like whether it's CAA, NRC, or, the right to information and privacy, you've gone to the highest court of the country.
Yeah, there again, I've gone in personal capacity.
Exactly.
So, you can't have it both ways.
You can't say... You're paying your own money and doing all of this.
So, for example, Bilkis Bano, I'm feeling very strongly. Absolutely. I've gone my own capacity. Yeah. CAA, gone my own capacity. CBI ED Director Extension, own capacity. Aadhaar, own capacity. Yeah. So, if I feel strongly about something, then that's the other side of the coin. I'm not waiting for a go-ahead from anybody. I'm going and doing it.
Yes.
And I think that's a very important part of public life.
Yeah. And you brought up the very sad Bilkis case right now. What is your opinion about this? Yes, but about women by large, right? Like, because I remember immediately after this verdict, there were a couple of gang rapes. There were 2 girls, I believe in UP, who were hung from trees.
That just happened.
It just happened. Yeah. And with each case that comes, as just at a fundamental level, I remember that I used to emote a lot and write about it on Twitter and on Instagram and say that anger, right? But like at this point, as a woman of the country, I just feel like at what point does it stop? And what do we as a society do to kind of...
We need to obviously look at it, but there's also one side of it. You have to understand that as far as human beings are concerned, as long as humans are alive, crimes will happen. There will be murder, there will be rape, there will be all of this. Nowhere in the world can you stop it.
Absolutely.
But what you can create is a system of law and order where there's a structure in a society where it is not pardonable. It's not, the fact is not that it happens. The fact is, like, what was so tragic in Bilkis Bano, she was raped 22 times in front of her child, she was murdered, blah, blah, blah. But the fact is, the police wanted to file a closure report.
Yes.
She had to fight for 17 years to get justice. So it's not just the act. I think what is the question of outrage and what separates civilized societies from ones that are struggling are not just that it happens. You can have abductions and rapes everywhere, but what happens after?
The enforcement
of the structure around the fact.
Right.
That's what separates, I think, civilized from uncivilized societies. And that's where our struggle is.
Absolutely.
So it's not just Bilkis happened, but she had to fight 17 years. And after it happened, so it's not even that these guys got remission, but the fact that they were garlanded and felicitated and made into heroes. Yeah. So you've got to see that in... right? So that's the most important part. That it happens is bad enough, but it could happen in a lot of places in the world. But it's how do we deal with it after?
Have you reached out to her in a personal capacity?
No, I haven't. Like I said, I don't want to get emotionally. I've gone to court, obviously, on it. Yes. But I think we'd be playing a much larger part by actually helping their effort rather than sort of,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And when you'd go that one step further, go to the Supreme Court, go and file these on your own time, with your own resources. Do your fellow politicians, parliamentarians come up to you and kind of commend you, or do you get that kind of recognition for going that extra mile, or is it something that isn't really...
I don't think you don't do it for the recognition, but I think when you do something that's important, like for example, Bilkis is really important, and common people, you don't really care about, I mean, there are only 540 of us in Parliament, and 542 of us in Parliament, at any given time there's probably about 200-300 only. So it's not that, somebody will come and tell you, you might get the odd comment here and there, but what is important is that this is something that has touched very many normal people. Citizens of the country, and they have reached out and said that thank God you're fighting this, and we really hope something comes out of it.
Yeah.
And because a lot of people feel very strongly, but they're obviously tied up in everyday life where they're not in a position to go out and do what needs to be done. So they are very happy to back and to support someone who's actually doing it.
Yeah.
And that's the larger part.
And this is one case that's about a woman, a common woman's ordeal. But you also take on prominent people in the country when you don't agree, or when you want some answers. For example, the PM Relief Fund, the auditing of that. Do you ever fear for yourself? Do you have...
I think that's something that when we were kids, we would always say, my mother would, when she would be mad at us, she'd say, oh, when God was giving out brains, you wanted the line that day. We did something foolish. So I think when God was giving out fear, I think I probably wasn't in the queue. Because I really feel I don't even bother about this. People keep asking me, I said, for what? What is there to fear? I don't understand.
Sometimes it can come externally. I saw a speech of yours in Parliament where you said your family members...
Yeah, people come and tell me, they say, be careful, be careful.
Yeah.
I get this all the time. Aren't you scared? Aren't you? I said, be careful of what? I mean, I don't get it. Be careful of what?
Yeah.
What have I done?
Right.
I haven't stolen a penny. I lead a very normal, blameless life. Yeah. I've never felt the need to take security. I don't have a security guy. Either in Bengal, I live in my constituency. I don't have a guard. I sleep alone. I mean, I don't see what the problem is. Yeah. I want to go out to Khan Market and have a coffee.
You will do that.
I would be part of, as the BJP calls it, the Khan Market gang. And if I were living in Karimpur and I went to get a cup of tea in the local market, I'd do the same thing.
Yeah.
So I don't see what the problem is. What is this whole fear and somebody's going to do something to you? Who's going to do what? I mean, I just don't get that. I don't get it. People come and tell me. I find it amusing.
Yeah.
If someone says, oh, they had some guards outside my house once. They put the police, there was some paramilitary forces outside my house. And I went out in my pajamas and I said, what are you guys doing here? And they said, we've been asked to be here. So the next day in Parliament, I asked the Home Minister, I said, you've got these guys outside my house. Can you remove them, please? And he removed them.
Why were they there?
I have no idea. Apparently, when I called up, they said they're there for your protection. And I said, well, there are lots of people in this country that need to be protected. I don't think I'm one of them. So I don't know whether, I think clearly it was for surveillance purposes and not protection. But I went up in the middle of Parliament and I spoke to the Home Minister and I said, makes me uncomfortable, can you remove them? And by 5 o'clock, they were gone. So it's as simple as that. I don't see what the big deal is.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, just out of, I think it's a if and or kind of.
People keep asking this all the time. But like I said, I find it quite amusing. I don't get it.
Yeah.
I just don't get it. I don't understand what there is to be scared of.
So you lead a seemingly normal life, right? And
not seemingly, it is a very normal life.
And when simple things like a Louis Vuitton bag in Parliament can catch the attention that it does, because you have been a banker, you have lived a life of luxury. It seeps in.
That's, I'll tell you, the funny part is that the BJP stole army. And this little Muppet who actually made that comment, I'd met him in somebody's house for dinner. It's completely unassuming. You wouldn't look twice. So this is obviously his moment of glory where he's trying to sort of, unassuming little Muppet where he's sitting there and texting. And he, if you look probably what he was wearing, he's probably wearing more designer wear than anybody else. This is such irrelevant nonsense.
Yeah.
And in my life, I've always brazened out irrelevant nonsense.
Yeah.
So when people come to me with all this, and they know it's irrelevant nonsense, because if they were to look within the BJP treasury benches and, look at the shoe, just look down at the footwear of what people are wearing, it'll be a lot more than my one little bag. So I think this is irrelevant nonsense. The only way is to brazen it out. I don't care.
Yeah.
And like I said, I just don't care.
Yeah.
I don't care.
Yeah, and I think that's pretty evident.
I just don't care. And if it gives these little Muppets something to do, and it makes them happy to go home and say, I took on Mahua Moitra, good luck to you.
Yeah.
Go back to Pune or wherever the hell you came from and be happy about it.
Yeah. So I have to ask this question, because I know that it does come up a lot, and I know you've answered it, but I need the time to ask it, is that, when you do speak about very important subjects like fascism and, things that are jeopardizing democracy of our country, a lot of people believe that Mamata Banerjee's brand of politics does subscribe to a few of those. And for the youth especially, how would you kind of position yourself in this dichotomy where on one end you are kind of speaking about the center, but your own party, the leader of your party, is kind of known to have a certain bit, allow a certain amount of violence, etc., which does happen. How do you feel about that?
I think that as far as Mamata ji is concerned, she is one of the very few people that I've seen. When you say that you feel fear, she is one of those people that I've really seen as naked, as an example of naked courage. And she can fight with her back to the wall and she can take on anyone. And we've seen that when she brought down this regime. She's very tenacious.
Of course.
She's brave and she's very tenacious. And I think those two qualities are very required in the Indian space, in the Indian democratic space today. So I think what she stands for, and no party is perfect. There's obviously, especially a party as large as ours, where there'll always be somebody or the other. You can't be standing up for everybody. It doesn't, even in your own family, there'll be a family member whose actions you can't always defend. So there's always going to be somebody in the party who's doing something that nobody can defend. And I don't even want to try and get into defending that. But that's not the point. It's basically, 8 out of 10 things, do you ascribe to the same way of thinking? And yes, I do. Yes. So I think as far as sort of destroying the secular fabric of this country is concerned. And that's where my biggest problem is with the people in power today. Yeah. It's not even so much about fascism or about anti-democracy. It is about just this whole breaking up of India into us versus them. Absolutely. In everything. Yeah. And this seeping of this hate into every level. Yeah. And I think that's something that Mamata ji really stands up against. Yeah. And for that, I'm eternally grateful to her.
And you used the word charming to describe her in the first conversation that you ever had. Do you remember what she said to you that made you feel that way?
Yeah, I think she's one person who's impossible to dislike on a one-on-one. So I remember the first time I met her, she's very disarming. She's very disarming, very candid, very casual. And I don't know, even the first time I met her, I felt like I'd known her. And I remember thinking, oh, I thought this and this, and she's nothing like this. Yeah. So she is very candid, very disarming, and very, very charming, very real. Yeah. Very real. And someone you can identify with. Yeah. And I think those are the qualities which really see her through her tough times. Because everyone rallies around, and the people of Bengal rally around, and they keep saying, she's our girl. Yeah. And they keep saying, she's ours. Yeah. Good, bad or ugly, she's ours. Yeah. And that's a very special feeling, to have that kind of connect with populace. And she has that. She has that in spades. I think she's one of the, when you talk of mass leader, that's really one of the things that she is. Yeah.
And how do you feel about the current relationship between the centre and all of the states independently, whether they are...
Well, obviously, we've spoken about this. There is no federal structure. The centre believes in destroying the federal structure of this country. And they want one-party rule. They want single-party rule everywhere. They want one religion, one nation, one election, or, one prime minister, one law, except a different law for them and different one for us. But, so they want a homogeneous India. And the one thing that India is not homogeneous. It is a union of states. It is not homogeneous. Yeah. Yeah. If you see Article 15, we cannot be discriminated against on the basis of religion and caste and all of those things. So why is that even there? Because we're all different. Yeah. And this one size fits all is something that is so dangerous for India.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So next segment is things about me you can't find on Google. So we've Googled extensively.
All right.
One person who you can call your closest friend in the any opposition in politics.
I'm not sure I can make that public, but I've got some good friends in the opposition.
Names. Any names?
Names, that's not fair.
Okay, give us a couple of names.
That's not fair. That's not fair. That's not fair because that's not fair. Because they'll get into the thing for it. They'll be like, aha, Mahua Moitra, you're friendly with Mahua Moitra, all right. No, I've got friends. I've got good friends in the TDP. I've got very good friends in the Congress. I've got friends everywhere. Yeah. Yeah.
What is Mahua like in her personal life? Paint us a picture, right? You come home and you're not Mahua Moitra.
I'm a bad-tempered, crabby bitch. That's what I am. At home, because I'm always tired when I get home. And I'm tired and the first thing I want to do is take a shower and sit down and not talk to anyone. So I'm not the greatest when I get home. But aside from that, I'm fine. I think I'm like I said, I'm a normal person.
And how do you spend your time off when you are off?
I don't get a lot of time off, but I like nothing. I mean, I like, I don't know, reading or eating or listening to music or chatting with friends or travel when I get the chance.
Yeah. Your comfort food?
I like my toast and bhujia along with a cup of adrak tea in the evening. That's my comfort food.
A myth about Indian politics that you would like to bust?
Again, like I said, that you need money and muscle. Yeah. You don't.
A character from a book or a movie that you relate to the most?
I don't relate to, but I like and I think he's cool. There's a character, there's a Bengali film called Bancha Ramer Bagan, and the main character is played by a guy called Manoj Mittir, who's a big theatre personality in Bengal, and he's called Bancha and he doesn't die. He refuses to die. So the zamindar says, after you die, your garden will become mine. This garden will become mine, and he doesn't die. And every time the zamindar goes, he goes to the sea, he says, I'm so sorry I'm not dying. I'm so sorry, I really want to die.
But I'm not.
But I'm not. And this money you're giving me till as long as I live is actually helping me live better. So now I've got shoes and I'm drinking milk every day. And I'm eating puris. So he's getting bigger. And in the end, the zamindar dies and this guy lives.
Yeah.
So I think that's one of those characters that I think is just super.
One thing you miss about your pre-politics life?
Time. I miss time. I miss just having the anonymity of just
being
and being able to take off when you want and do what you want when you want.
One thing about your opposition party that you applaud?
Which, the BJP?
Any.
I mean, when you talk about, if I'm looking at my opposition, that is the BJP. I think they are, as a party, they're very disciplined. They're very disciplined, and I think that they have this work ethic, which one has to admire. By and large, they're a very disciplined party which relies on work ethic. And, they always say that the most disciplined parties with ideology are the far right and the far left.
Yeah.
And I think that's true. That's very true.
Do you have a celebrity crush?
Yeah, Pankaj Tripathi, I just told you. It used to be Saif Ali Khan, but now it's Pankaj Tripathi.
Okay, that's changed.
It's changed, yeah.
If not Mahua the MP, what do you think you would be now, today?
I would have been a banker.
You would have been?
Yeah, I would have remained a banker.
Yeah. What would your friends term you as? What would they call you? If we had to chat with your friends today and say, how is Mahua?
They'd all say Mahua's Mahua, because I guess it's too difficult to try and explain. So they would all say, well, Mahua or Mahua's Mahua. So that's about it. I think I've really become my own paradigm.
Yeah. Okay. The next segment is, we have a couple of photos, but these were really hard to dig up actually. There's not a lot of images of you online from back in the days, but we did find two.
Were you like looking into my, some random friend's Facebook?
We were looking, we stalk,
God,
we're professional stalkers, yeah.
That's
what we do.
What have you done?
So we're going to show you the photo and you have to tell us the backstory of that photo. Yeah.
Okay, that's very easy. That's my mother and I at my mother's 60th birthday, I think it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's my mother's 60th birthday.
And what
my parents' 40th anniversary. My parents' 40th anniversary and my parents' 60th birthday. It was in Calcutta. It was a great grand celebration. And yeah, I remember that. It's my mom and I.
This is the second one.
That's also a fabulous one. That's outside the Opera House in Stockholm, in Sweden.
Yeah.
And we were staying at the Grand Hotel, and it was just behind that. And I went for an evening walk and going out for a drink. And I just took that photo. There were the tulips there. It was a lovely summer's day. Yeah, that was maybe 2013-14.
Wow.
I remember that.
Yeah, it's like a different life.
Yeah, it is.
It's a different life. Amazing. Okay, now we have our absolute last segment, which is just last questions.
Yeah. Rapid fire. What? Tell me.
It's not rapid fire. What piece of advice would you give the 10-year-old Mahua?
Work harder.
Yeah.
Just study really hard and absorb even more things.
Yeah.
Just absorb from everything around you.
That's it. This very long interview has ended.
My God. My God, my God. Yes.
Thank you so much. I didn't feel like it was an interview and I don't want it to end. I could have...
Did you use all your little cards?
No, I didn't even look at it because I was just going with it, and my editor back in Bombay is going to be like, but you just skipped through the cards.
So many important stuff.
Yeah, but because it was such a great conversation. Thank you for being so honest and amazing.
No. Thank you. I'm glad you guys stepped across all the way from Bombay.
Yeah.
And did this. So, best of luck in all your endeavors, and good luck. And thank you for doing this.
Thank you, and excited for the episode.
Thank you. And say hello to Pankaj Tripathi. Don't forget.
Done.
Huh? Don't forget. I'm giving my note right now. So, Pankaj, you call me. You better air that part where I've said he's my crush, huh? I want him to know this.
Why will we not?
Dear Pankaj.
Writing a note to a celebrity crush. Any guesses?
Pankaj G. I'm going to say G. He hasn't got an envelope, but anyway, I'll give you an envelope.
Got it. If you like this episode, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit that bell icon. Thank you all for being the best community and I'll see you soon. तो आपने पहले सुना कि वो नदी के उस पार का कोई एक्टर बना है, फिर आपने उनसे पटना में मिले, आप जब मौर्य होटल में थे, आपने वो उनकी चप्पल ले ली और फिर आप उनके को-स्टार बन गए।
मनोज भैया के लिए और पूरे संसार के लिए वो चप्पल होगा, मेरे लिए वो चरण पादुका थी। तो राम जी जब वनवास गए थे ना, तो भरत को सत्ता दे के गए थे, राजा तुम बनोगे। भरत ने बोला नहीं, बड़े भैया इसके हकदार थे, तो मैं उनका चरण पादुका ले लिया और रख दिया। तो हमारे लिए वैसा ही है कि मनोज भैया की जर्नी से मैं इंस्पायर हुआ। हम जीवन में रेफरेंस खोजते हैं ना कि ऐसा कोई किया है क्या, ऐसा हुआ है क्या। तो मुझे दिखा कि ऐसा हुआ है, पड़ोस के डिस्ट्रिक्ट के साधारण पृष्ठभूमि के आदमी एक्टर बने हैं।